to enjoy. Now, this is your time for our afternoon panel, your roadmap to early career success, moderated by Irene Fan, who is the Senior Vice President at the MSB Group and Borden Studios NYC, a brand new film studio located in Long Island City. Please welcome Irene and our amazing panelists to the stage with the biggest round of applause, like you all ate. Very good.
Hi, everyone. How's it going? Good? It's a packed room in here. I'm getting kind of nervous. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the afternoon session of your Roadmap to Early Career Success. Today, we'll dive into important conversations about the power of first impressions when you are at your first internship or your first job, and how that can set the foundation for your future career growth. We will also explore early career experiences, share practical advice on building strong networks, and also strategies on goal setting and mentorships. We are truly fortunate to be joined by some accomplished industry professionals who will share with you their journey as well. So please join me in welcoming our guest to the stage. Well, they're already on the stage, so welcome. First, we have Seema Zadovali, Senior Manager, Early and Emerging Talent at Mattel. Yeah. Next, we have Aaliyah Jones-Harvey, Associate Commissioner, Education, Workforce, and Policy at the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. Next, we have Darren Johnston, Chief Program Officer at BRIC. And then lastly, we have Raina Campbell, Senior Marketing Manager and Pitch, Paramount Brand Studio and Paramount Advertising. So we'll get started. While I've given you all their names and titles, you don't really, you may or may not know, their day-to-day responsibilities, what they do at their job. If we can maybe go down the line and you all share with them your day-to-day responsibilities and also what you like about your current role.
All right, I'll start. Hi, everyone. I think I spoke to some of you out there today, so good to see you again. So as Irene mentioned, I am the Senior Manager of Early and Emerging Talent at Mattel. I have been in my role for 8 years. What my title means is I'm part of the global talent team. Specifically, I oversee all of our early and emerging talent programming, leadership development programs, internship programs, things like that. I'm responsible for talent strategies, university relationships, organizational relationships like Center for Communication, and I just love connecting students to their career path or the next step in their career. So happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Aaliyah Jones-Harvey. I've been in my role with the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment now for 10 years. My day-to-day responsibilities include managing the programs team, which does programming across 7 industries that we support, including film, television, theater, music, publishing, advertising, and digital games. In addition, I own the digital games portfolio and build relationships with organizations like Center for Communication and RealWorks and the Animation Project to create workforce development programs, Brooklyn Workforce Innovations, all organizations that we support in efforts to grow industry in New York City, which is my main focus. What I love about my job is that we are in a sandbox and kind of get to create where we want to focus based on trends in the industry and how we want to support the industry. So I find it to be a lot of fun and always different, every single day being something new. So.
Thank you. Okay, so Darren Johnston again, Chief Program Officer here at BRIC. My day-to-day responsibilities also fit within 7 neat little buckets here at BRIC. That ranges from overseeing Celebrate Brooklyn, New York City's longest running outdoor concert series, which is really fun. Last night we had Grace Jones and Janelle Monáe. That was amazing. I also oversee 2 media departments here at BRIC, Brooklyn Free Speech and BRIC TV, as well as 2 education departments, our contemporary art gallery and a community impact department. There are also some other programs that we have here that don't fit into those buckets. Maybe some of you are familiar with them: Jazz Fest, Poetry Slam, House Party, which is BRIC's foray into nightlife, various other programs. I will say what I enjoy about my work on the day-to-day is, prior to my work here at BRIC, I spent 10 years doing community organizing work across New York City, supporting the city's most neglected communities. Prior to that, spent some time as an artist myself, and this role here at BRIC in particular allows me to merge those worlds of not only providing workforce development resources for folks in the community and artists, but being able to bridge the gap between what it is that our communities need and providing resources and accessibility to opportunities to young people such as yourselves, and the resources we have here in media and arts at BRIC and our partners and institutions that we work with. That work means a lot to me. Thank you for that question, by the way.
Hi, everyone. I am Raina Campbell. I am a senior manager on the pitch team at Paramount Brand Studio. And Paramount Brand Studio is Paramount's in-house branded content studio. So that means we do all the brand partnerships, sponsorships for everything you see across the Paramount ecosystem. So just to give you guys an example, you guys all know Wendy's, right? Raise your hand if you know Wendy's. You guys know SpongeBob, right? SpongeBob is Nickelodeon. So one of the deals that my team worked on is that Wendy's and SpongeBob meal that you guys saw. Do you guys know that? That's what you call brand partnership, right? So that's a deal that we had to work on in-house to figure out how can we merge Paramount's IP, which is SpongeBob, with this really cool brand such as Wendy's. That took almost over a year for that deal to finalize and all the workings of that. So that's an example of some of the things I do from day to day. We do brand integration. So if you're ever watching a show on like Paramount Plus and you see a Coca-Cola bottle, that's our team that's helping to pitch that. So everything that, any content that can be monetized and we can do some sort of brand partnership, there is a specific team at Paramount that does that, and that's Paramount Brand Studio. And what I really like about my team, about my role in general is, I think number one, I didn't even know it existed before I got the job. Meaning, and we can go into that later on, but I was like a new mom. I was looking for a job during the pandemic. One of my coworkers, or one of my colleagues told me about this, and it was a role where I'm like, wait, this matches all the skill sets I have, and just being able to utilize those skill sets in a role that if I wouldn't even know to search it if someone hadn't told me about it. So it's just letting you know that you can create opportunities wherever you are, but sometimes you just need that person to kind of get the ball rolling, so.
Thank you, everybody. We're gonna start the conversation with, first impressions, right? The things that you do in a professional setting, in a personal setting, really does matter in terms of, how your career advancement could play out. I run a training program for the MBS group called Illumination Training, and one of the things I tell my students all the time is treat every situation, whether or not it's formal or informal, as an interview process, because you don't know whether or not there could be an opportunity for you. They could be hiring and they were assessing whether or not you're a great fit for the position. You just don't know. So for this question, more towards Seema and Darren, what actions did you take early in your career that helped you advance, and how did it help with your career path that led to where you are today?
I'll take this first. Well, first off, I'm more impressed with you guys than myself, because I didn't do anything like this when I was in college, so you already are way ahead of step of my 22-year-old self, or however old you are. But to figure out where I wanted to be, I originally wanted to go to law school. I wanted to be a lawyer. And so what I decided to do was, I was a poli-sci major, and then I worked at a law firm, and I was like, I'm not going to be a lawyer. It's not for me. So what else do I like doing? And I've always loved kids and students, and so I added on an education minor, and then I started working part-time at kind of like a Kumon kind of center. Then I started running that, and then I wanted to be a teacher, and then we had a recession, and then I was like, okay, where can I make my mark here? Then I realized I'm really good at identifying talent in young people and matching them to a career, and that just kind of evolved into my current role and company. And it's just such an honor to like see students and then be able to give them tips and advice. And I see students taking notes right now, and these are the types of impressions that when I'm on campus, we look for, the business looks for. Introducing yourself, kind of, portraying that confidence and doing research on companies organically that you resonate the values with. So if you like, what Barbie stands for, or Uno, or Hot Wheels, making sure you're following Mattel on LinkedIn. So when we meet, you have talking points that are naturally already there. So kind of make sure it's an ongoing process for you in your, career journey.
Yeah, this is a good question. When you say early in your career, for me that means 13, 14 years old. And so when I think about what did I do at 13 to prepare myself for a career, I would probably give credit to my mother, who made sure that I was exposed to circumstances that allowed me to demonstrate really social skills at a young age. And I do think that has, I've carried that with me throughout the course of my career. As a graduate, once I graduated school and began exploring what I wanted to do, I had one of those weird degrees as an undergraduate student. I majored in sociology, which a lot of folks are like, what are you gonna do with that again? And I found myself, of course, you go through the resume process and you're sending your resume out to all of the places and the spaces and trying to figure out if this aligns with what your vision for yourself is and what your dreams are. And I found the skill that benefited myself was combining those social skills, that emotional intelligence, with being active about researching the institution that I wanted to land at and going to events that institution was holding, whether that was conferences, whether that was just events that they might be throwing in community. Wherever I would find an organization, I would try to figure out where they were doing some kind of public event and just make myself present and meet folks and start talking to folks and getting contact information. And then when that institution had an opening, I would email that person directly, just having a contact in that organization that I wanted to be at. And I found that to be just a helpful skill, merging the research and the initiative to meet people in that institution to draw the connection when opportunity presented itself.
Can I add something quickly? I think knowing yourself is really important. So what are you good at? What's your value proposition? So person A is going to be good at something different than person B, and how are you going to bring that value? And when you're looking at jobs, kind of identifying, okay, I can do that, I'd be good at that, and making sure you're kind of emphasizing that during your conversations or application process or cover letter or whatever it might be.
So Darren, you spoke a little bit about your mother, and I would assume she played a huge role in terms of the way you were raised. As you would think of her as a role model, right? Mm-hmm. And I think role models or mentors do play an important role within your career path as well. I never really had one role model or mentor. I think as you progress within your career, reassessing who your role models or mentors are is very important because they play various roles within your career. So maybe if we can go down the line, if you can all share maybe one of your mentors that you've had and why they played a huge role within your career.
I can start. I remember when I was an intern at CBS in college, I interned through this program called the Emma Bowen Foundation. Anybody here ever heard of it? Okay, yeah. And I was an intern at CBS, and I had met someone. So she was a recent graduate, but she just got the job. And so she wasn't necessarily an executive at the time, but she was someone who was maybe 2 to 3 years ahead of me, Gabrielle Simpson. And she was very ambitious, and she was like, you know what, girl, let's stick together, right? And let's I'll be here for you. I'll teach you the ropes of what I know now. Because at the time, she was only a manager, and she went on to she went to NBC, she worked at Columbia, she was at Amazon, now she's at the Hatchet Group. She's really grown in her position, but just latching on to her, that's probably not the good word, right? But like her being a mentor to me and just kind of being a big sister to me and saying, hey, I'm going to teach you the ropes of what I'm learning right now. So she wasn't necessarily somebody who was like, president at the time. Like, look for someone who maybe is a little bit older than you that can teach you just a few nuggets of how to navigate whatever it is that you're trying to navigate. And for me, that was really helpful for someone being so young and in college. She wasn't intimidating. She kept it real. And she also kept me top of mind for a lot of opportunities. So that kind of stuff really was helpful for me early on.
Yeah, I don't think I had outside of my mother and my father, a mentor in the field that I work in that I could pinpoint and say, this is the person that created access points for me or that gave me tips or guided me. And I've also had a number of careers. Right out of school, I started in public education, then I went to community organizing, and then I find myself here in arts and media. I grew up in a household of musicians, and so I've had like a winding kind of journey trying to figure out how to best apply what my interests were, whether that was community organizing or the arts or media. I will say there were people along that journey that helped me concretize my sense of identity. And that gave me the confidence to explore and to figure out and to own who it is I thought that I was becoming. And that, that kind of confidence gave me the bravery to enter into new spaces, even if I wasn't quite sure what the outcome of being in that space would be. And the first person that comes to mind at the time was the Dean of African American Studies at the University of Virginia, which is where I went to undergrad. And, didn't even know I was an artist, didn't know I was going to end up in arts and media or even go into community organizing, but very much understood that I was on a journey, and that understanding my identity and gaining confidence is something that was critical to my growth. And that's something that I bring with me to whatever sector I find myself supporting, whether that be education, arts, media, art, et cetera, et cetera. So that was probably the first person outside of my parents. And then right now, as an executive, what I probably undervalued and value very much now is what we consider as executives having an executive coach. And that's something that I'm just now experiencing, and that is someone that I would consider now as a mentor. Mentors are absolutely critical and important, and I would encourage anyone to, even if you're not sure if this person is someone that's going to be in the sector that you find yourself in, having that person to bounce all the thoughts that you have in your head off of and where you could go with that is just a critical point of reflection for yourself and growth and development. So those would probably be the two for me.
Oh, okay, I was thinking back to my first job out of college, which was in IT. I mean, I've had a winding career too, and I was working in IT at Procter & Gamble, and my first mentor was my boss. She hired me, and I was so lucky that she also wanted to mentor me, which doesn't always happen. Oftentimes, you're going to have to find someone else besides your boss to be telling you, which way to go. But she gave me a lot of direction in a corporate environment that I was not familiar with, and how to navigate that, how to network in that environment, how to join affinity groups within the corporate structure to try to meet people in other offices, to give them a sense of the fact that I was working on this project, how to be able to share what I was doing with other divisions, so that I could start to make a name for myself in a large company, and then opportunities to seek out oftentimes, and I didn't know any of this before I started with Procter & Gamble, but oftentimes in the corporate structure and in media, the larger companies have this kind of program that's often a rotation. And if you find one where you will be able to rotate through a lot of different offices, that is golden in terms of a way to present yourself to a lot of different divisions, a way for you to see what's going on in different areas of the company, because ultimately the people that a company wants to invest in and promote forward are the people who have exposure to a few different areas. And so that's who I would point to as my first mentor. But I've had a number of them along the way, because every time I've ended up doing something, different, I need some guidance, of course, to understand where I can go and where I can't go. So.
Well, thanks for plugging my job, because those are the types of programs I develop, so that's awesome. I would say I've had a mentor in some capacity, whether I recall a very hard professor I had one year who was not my favorite person until like a year later, where I was like, oh my God, I grew and developed so much because this professor challenged me in ways I had never known, and that growth took like a year for me to recognize. Same with almost all the bosses I've ever had, whether I considered them good bosses or bad bosses, they challenged me, and I felt that growth a little bit later. Currently at Mattel, I've been there long enough now where I call what I have, and they don't even know that they're on it, my own board of directors. These are people that I've cultivated relationships with over the course of several years now that I know advocate for me when I am not in the room. And so I think that's the ultimate thing to strive for, and then pay it forward, right? Like make sure you're doing that for someone else. And then I don't take for granted reverse mentoring. I learn so much from my interns and the students, and things are changing out there in the landscape. So it's really helpful for me to have a pulse, through students like you as well, who teach me about things out there every day.
I love the board of directors. Like just having your own set of board of directors that advocate for yourself as you progress is extremely important. Whether or not you're in a corporate setting or whatever professional setting that you are in, like I totally agree on that too. Yeah. Similar to mentors and role models within your career path, I think when it comes to goal setting as well, being able to reevaluate them, because something that you've set for yourself early on during the year may not really resonate with you anymore, 6 months down the road or a year later, depending on where your path is taking you, right? So for Aaliyah and Raina, did you set goals early on with your career, and how did you achieve them?
Yes, I did. I was pretty ambitious when I started out, and as I said before, I started out in consumer products at Procter & Gamble. I did achieve, I think my first goal was to complete the first project that I got ahead of schedule. That was my first goal, like impress them, work really hard. And then when I got to my second project, at that point I already knew I was ready to leave Cincinnati. I started looking for other opportunities, and I kept getting drawn back into other projects. When I finally moved to New York, and thought I was going into financial services and headed in that direction. I spent 5 years in financial services, and the goals that I was setting along the way were really about clients and acquiring clients, because that's what I was doing, right? And so hitting those milestones. But then ultimately, it led me into entertainment, which was pretty cool. A mentor that I had in business school called me up and said, would you want to produce Broadway shows? And I jumped at the opportunity. All those clients I had been collecting were now a prime prospect group for me to mine for investors in theater. And the goals, I've been doing theater, and I'm still doing theater. I've been doing theater now for about 18 years. My goals have always been around supporting projects that I feel really passionate about and creating opportunity for artists, for talent to be able to express themselves. So I feel very fulfilled in that light. And then in this role that I've taken on over the past 10 years of trying to find opportunities for people that want to work in the creative industries. I think the goals that I've set along the way have been around trying to understand what New York looks like in terms of opportunity, and then trying to understand how our office can impact this really transitional environment. I think that the industry over the past 10 years has gone from being on fire in New York. I mean, work everywhere. You could literally walk onto a lot and, you know, if you weren't doing anything, you might be pulled into being a PA. To now everyone is hustling at every level to try to get opportunities. And so we've had to shift along the way. And so my goals, of course, have shifted as well. And really now, I'm brass tacks. When people call our office saying they're looking for an opportunity, we're trying to figure it out. And we're trying to figure out, you know, and I have a few people that are working with me to do that, but we're trying to figure out, based on what your skill set are there any opportunities that we know of? And believe it or not, there is hiring happening, and there are a number of companies that are looking for people and just still don't have the most direct route to get to the person who says, I want a job working for, you know, Paramount or Mattel. And so we're still faced with making that connection easier for people. And so that's where my goal is now, is making that connection easier for people to get to the job they're looking for.
This is a good question because I think it's something that is based on perspective. So I knew for me coming out of Princeton, I didn't have like these big goals, but I knew who I was. So at that point, I was defining myself as, I'm a storyteller. I like to inspire people. Then I also had this practical side of me. My family is Caribbean American, right? First generation American. So I don't want to be broke. That was the biggest goal, right? I don't want to be broke. I don't want to have to ask my parents for money. Like, I want to be independent. So having this, I want to be independent. I know I'm a storyteller. I know, you know, I like to inspire people. I know I like to make money. How can I put myself into positions that teach me how to do that better? So I think it was more so defining what your values are, defining who you are, and defining what you want to be. And I think for a lot of us, financial is driving us considerably, and that's why I think it's also having the mentors, right? Having people tell us things that we might not have known. Like, I know Gabrielle, the mentor that I told you I met at CBS, she was like, girl, never take the first offer, right? Never take the first offer they give you if you ever get a job. And that was something that helped me in getting my first job, because now I know, hey, I want to make money, and if I want to make more money, I have to know how to negotiate for myself, right? So having all these like, I want to be a storyteller. And it's funny because knowing that about myself, even though my first job out of college wasn't a dream job, it wasn't a sexy job, I was working at an institute called the Vera Institute of Justice in New York City. I was doing a program. That was helping people in prison get college educations. It wasn't sexy, but it was important, right? And it was something where I was still able to put my storytelling skills to use, learn how governments are making money, right? I was very observant, and I think at this stage of your career, it's not more so about finding the dream job. I think it's about building your unique skill set that helps keep you and help you stand alone and just help you really stand apart from other candidates. Having this really unique opinion about yourself and knowing how to express that was something that was totally helpful for me in my career. And one of the things else when it comes to just goal setting, when it came to a life shift, so for me, the pandemic was very life-changing. Were you guys in high school during the pandemic? High school, probably early years of college. But for me, I became a mom during the pandemic, right? And my mindset has to shift because I'm like, all right, girl, you're doing all this little loosey-goosey, stuff. You need to start being more strategic. And so when you come to different points in your life, you're going to have these things that force you to kind of change your goals. So now I knew working in corporate, hey, you need to be a little bit strategic. You need to learn the strategy of working in a corporate position. So in this role at Paramount, I really feel like I grew up as a person, right? I had people managing to me. I was understanding how like this billion-dollar company was making money, and I just had to move differently, but that came at this stage of my life. So I would say follow the stage that you're in right now. Discover right now who you are, and make your goals centered around who you are and where you want to be. It might be aspirational, but just having that right now will really help serve as a guide, and be real about it. If you want to make money, let that be one of your goals, right? But commit to understanding how you do that in the industry that you're pursuing.
When our speakers were sharing their backgrounds to us, one of the key things that I've kind of noticed was there was a lot of pivoting within, your path to where you currently are today. Media entertainment, for those that do want to get into media entertainment, it's quite hard, I'm not gonna lie, right? Like there's no direct path on like becoming a director or like a producer or a writer or whatever role that you have at Paramount or any of these other studios, or even at your current role at Mattel. Like you seem to have had like various paths to get to where you are today. So I do want to touch base on maybe a little bit on pivoting and how maybe some of you can share some advice, because I know it can be very nerve-wracking. I'm sure some of you also have pressures from your parents, right? That like you need to have a certain career or a certain role at a company. Like I got that too with my parents. I was given five roles. I had to be either become a lawyer, dentist, doctor, or an accountant. Somehow I did become an accountant, but eventually I ended up at the MBS group running a studio, which is completely outside of finance and accounting. So maybe Darren and Seema, if you could share some tips on how to navigate through like pivoting and how nerve-wracking it can be and how you can maybe navigate through that.
So I think you are all at a perfect stage for this. I actually think it's a little bit more nerve-wracking probably at maybe our ages when you're applying for a role, you expect the direct experience related, because there's a certain expectation when you come in. For you all, we see you as having that fresh, new energy and perspective. So even if you are not like maybe the correct major or you don't have the correct experience that is stated on the resume, that's okay. And that goes back to what I was talking about research, like researching the company and understanding what it is they value and what it is as a general employee they're kind of looking for and type of person. So for us, for instance, our values are collaboration, innovation, execution. So we want people who are creative and think outside the box and can work together across lines of business, who come to a problem and don't just stop, they look for a creative solution. So how are you going to demonstrate that on a resume? So think of your group work on campus, any leadership involvement on campus, if you play sports, if you have a part-time job, like all of that matters. And additionally, at your age too, or the stage of career you're at, I hear a lot of recruiters say, and this is maybe more for just early talent recruiters, we don't read cover letters. And I like to say that's not true. I read every single cover letter. I think especially at this stage, how else are you going to kind of explain what it is your value is? So, just make sure it demonstrates your writing skills. A lot of you want to be like copywriters. So like tell your story, like catch our eye. This is your kind of ability to set yourself apart from everyone else. And I think the world is your oyster right now, is that the phrase? And I think you're just at such an exciting stage. So do exactly what you're doing. You are all coming and talking to us and networking, but I think research is key. And just reach out to people on LinkedIn who are doing the job that you want. Take that chance. You may not get an answer, or you might, and this is your time to like pick their brain, and that's a new contact that you're making. So just putting yourself out there, and I say it's best to not necessarily reach out to the recruiter because we get so many messages. Go to the person whose job you hope to have in the next 5, 10 months, 5, 10 years, whatever it might be, and get all the intel you can, and that'll make your pivots more informed.
Yeah, I would echo the sentiment. Resumes and cover letters are important. I made the comment earlier about like being present, going to places to make that contact and having those social skills, but I oversaw a workforce development program for years, and in a position where you're managing folks who are hiring folks, just work culture and building a team and all, like people take that stuff very seriously. So take your resume and your cover letter very seriously. Don't be shy about paying for that Grammarly subscription just to make sure it's tight. If that's something, if you're not like an English major, like do it. You'll find it helpful. But to the initial question around pivoting, yeah, there are so many circumstances that will inspire you to pivot or will force you to pivot. And so I do think it's wise to be prepared for that. You may land the job for yourself and you're like, oh, I've been doing this for a few months, but this is more boring than I thought it would be. Or maybe there's a family circumstance that causes you to have to move. Or maybe you pick up a new interest as you're exploring your career path. You take a class or something, you're like, this is interesting to me. Or maybe you find a partner. There's so many reasons why bracing yourself for a career that gives you the freedom to pivot is important. I feel like there are two camps when you either graduate undergrad or graduate school. There are like the folks who know exactly what they want to do, and they're like just going for that. And then there are the folks who are like, not sure, I'm kind of flexible around this. And I think in both circumstances, you will still find yourself needing to pivot. And a interesting or valuable, I guess, just a structured way to think about this is, in my last job, I had a supervisor who thought it was very important for the staff that they'd supervise to have a few things in place for themselves. One, have the goal of having some kind of transition either within the job that you're in or to another job every 2 years. So that could mean some kind of big project that you're taking on. That could mean a promotion, that could mean a job change, whether internally or externally. Every 2 years, you should be thinking about and resetting how you're responding to changes in a sector, your salary, your goals, and kind of reassessing those things and mapping out and being intentional about where you want yourself to be and go. And so, I mean, yes, the resume is important, and thinking about how can I build my resume to prepare me and brace myself for an impending pivot that I might not have control over. And looking at relationships in that way too. What kind of relationships or mentors, board of advisors do you want to create for yourself that give you the ability of choice? And if there is a pivot that you need to make, there's guidance around you that can help you navigate the challenges or the pivots that life will force you to make decisions around at some point.
Can I add something really quickly? So I think especially when you start your first job postgraduate, whether you're undergraduate, graduate, I think a really good practice is and obviously I have to practice this myself as well, but once a month or even once a week, whatever cadence you are, look back. What was I successful at this month, and write it down. Because if you have to make a pivot, if something happens and you have to update that resume, you have everything logged. That's a very helpful tip.
I like that.
Can I add to that really quickly? Yeah. And also, I think it's also good to say what didn't you like or what weren't you successful at, because I think at this stage of your career, knowing what you don't like is also very important as you're making pivots. Pivot towards something, hopefully, that is a new experience and a new exploration that you'll want to enjoy, right? Like, hopefully you don't have to pivot to something that is something you don't enjoy, but if it is, think about what about this don't you like, and then use that for future when you're looking for new positions as well.
Every time I hear the word pivot, I think of the episode from Friends. Yeah, if you haven't seen it, you should go watch it. It's really funny. So we talked about resume and cover letters a little bit. So those are extremely important. What are qualities that you kind of look for in candidates after you've got them through the door from the resume and cover letter? Like, are there specific qualities that you look for in an interview? I'm sure all of you have hired interns, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. Maybe one quality that you can think of each.
Don't be afraid to ask questions. Interns come in, they think I'm not supposed to ask questions. That's why we're bringing you in, is for you to learn and for us to learn from you. So, when you're sitting in the room, it may feel intimidating, but we want to hear your voice.
I guess having information on what we do before coming in the door is
Research.
It's a shame that that's so impressive, but it is. Oftentimes, I'm in situations where someone's asking me, "So what do you do?" and I feel like we have a website with all the information about what we do. That candidate that comes in with that knowledge already is already going to stand out, and the candidate who's come in and even gone further, they're going to get it. They're going to get the job. We've had intern candidates who've come in who actually called our office manager, like called the main line and asked her a few questions about our office and how it runs so that they would know before the interview and they could ask informed questions, based on that information. So, of course, they got all the way through the process because they took that extra step to find out a little more than what would be on our website.
For candidates, I think hiring managers, well, as a hiring manager, what I often find inspiring is when a candidate tethers their values to the mission or goals of the organization or institution that I'm at. That's something that's nice to hear. And it speaks to your understanding of your identity, your long-term goals, and what's important to you. And if you can articulate your values and mirror them with the goals or the vision of the organization and speak to that in an interview, that might give you a nice little check in a box. I think for folks that land a position, offering solutions to challenges that you discover is valuable. Managers and directors like to solve problems, and they like to expand and grow their programs and get wins for you and for themselves. And so once you land a job and you notice something that could use your expertise or you have ideas around something, having the ability to navigate spaces and relationships to respectfully offer those ideas and make sure you're pinpointing challenges and issues and having solutions that you can offer in order to address what it is that you're seeing that could use improvement.
I would add to what everyone was saying and say, lead with your unique perspective. Like when I interview for people, when I'm interviewing for positions, I like when candidates come and lead with their identity, right? Like I once was working with someone who was just a recent college graduate. She was actually jobless for 2 years following the pandemic, right? And she couldn't find a job, and she was a TikToker at the time, and she made a really good brand for herself on TikTok in film and TV, and she could have not told us about that during the job interview, but I like that she kind of led with this story about who she was and this story about how she had resiliency, right? I saw, okay, she was not getting what she wanted, which was a job, but she hustled in the sense of she wasn't going to let that define her. Not having a job wasn't going to define her. She was going to create her own brand from it. And so from just sharing that story, I, as a recruiting manager, was able to say, okay, this tells me a lot about who she is. And a lot of times we don't often know how to articulate who we are, but people can understand from the stories you tell them who you are. And we're hiring for people who will be an asset to our company in different ways, and having diversity of experience, diversity of values, diversity of just life in general is something that I think always is going to be good. So don't be afraid to lead with your personal story or lead with something that defines you or differentiates you, because the person who you're talking to can kind of use that as clues to who you are and how you'll show up in the position if you do get it.
Darren, you're really good, because my next question was going to be, once you land the job, what do you do within the first month to make sure you stand out? So you got to pass, because you already answered that question.
There you go.
Raina.
Can I add to that? Because it's funny, in this same job, so it was between her and this other candidate, and I realized just from talking to them that their first month would be entirely different. One was going to try to learn as much about the job, and one was going to try to pimp the job. And I say that because you're at this big company, right? Paramount. They were going to get in that job, and based upon what they were telling me through their story, ambition is great, right? But that first month should really be about learning what you're doing and not necessarily trying to like make a name for yourself at the company. And I had to be very strategic and say, okay, who's going to be here for the team and who's there for themselves? Because we want people who will help everyone's jobs better. Like, I don't want you to come here, then you have 10 one-on-ones with people in all different companies just because you want to be at Paramount. You finally got that dream job. So I think your first month at the job, learn as much as you can about the people you're working with, about the roles that you're doing. Really try to solidify how you'll show up for the role that you got hired for, and then expand, right? But I would say focus on that, because people do not want people who are coming in just to, have that brand name, just to have the look, and aren't really wanting to do the actual role.
Aaliyah?
I would say quick wins always create an impression. And so if you are given a project, figure out how to deliver, on what you've been asked to do. Go above and beyond in that quick win will open a lot of doors for you to get more projects, be able to expand your responsibilities, and that first impression will drive the rest of your time in that experience or in that job. So quick wins, look for a quick win. And it might not be an overall project that you're doing, it might just be a piece of a project, but that quick win is gonna go far with your manager.
Yeah, I would say, and this is something I've been seeing as a trend, master the work tools that your workplace uses. So if week one you realize they're using Outlook, Microsoft, and you have never used those before, get a tutorial, make sure you know how to use those. I have had interns and new hires miss meetings because they didn't know how to activate the calendar reminder. So little things like that that'll increase your productivity. If it's Slack, do you know how to use Slack? Is it Teams? How do they, and know how your people, your stakeholders, like to be contacted. So is it via Teams? Is it a text? Is it an email? So you slowly need to observe your main stakeholders and respond and react and adjust yourself according to them.
Oh, and I would add in there that communicate regularly with your manager, and your manager might not be good at communicating with you. They are, you're gonna run into all kinds of different managers and colleagues all throughout your career, but communicate regularly with them. Don't hide. Because when you hide, they're going to assume you're not doing anything, and or whatever, or and so I would say just make it a habit. It will be impressive to a manager that doesn't have the time to communicate with you if once a week you say, quick note, here's everything that I'm working on. Here's what I accomplished last week. Here's what I'm looking forward to this week. Do that, and it will go very far with someone who might be overwhelmed themselves. You're coming in as an additional person on their slate of people to work with, and they may not be thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to deal with this. So if you give them all that information without them asking for it, imagine how far that will go.
All great tips. Thank you. So I think there was a networking seminar thing earlier today, right? Okay, cool. How many of you in this room actually enjoy networking? Oh, a fair amount. Okay. I will be honest, when I first started networking, when I started my career, didn't like it at all. It was very nerve-wracking. It was very uncomfortable. But I would probably say now, it's one of my favorite things to do, just to meet people and share my story and hear their stories and stuff like that. So I think my tip for networking would be as you continue doing it more, it becomes easier, especially when you do have a story to share with people and tell them why you're so great and amazing. But for our speakers, is there anything that you would like to share when it comes to networking? Because these individuals here, very new to it, any tips or tricks for them?
I can go first. I would say kind of before approaching someone, kind of observe the physical space of the whole room. A lot of the time it's going to be crowded. You would say one table that's like a lot more crowded than the other. So kind of pick your moment to approach somebody, and also just mind your kind of physical space. Don't like stand behind people. Like just kind of that etiquette is going to kind of show someone how you're going to navigate an organization, how you're going to show up in front of leadership, how you're going to present yourself, which I think is very important. And those are just physical cues that are in addition to the talking points that you're going to make.
I can add, I think that you need to make it natural for you and your unique personality. I'll give you guys a quick example is I built a podcast. I have a podcast. It's called Dreams and Drive, over 420 episodes, launched in 2016. And for me, I knew that I was going to use it not only as a media platform, but as a networking tool in my own world of, I like to talk to people about their stories, right? So I created a platform then that people can naturally come on, and now we have these relationships, and being able to leverage those relationships in a space that was natural to me. And every job that I've had has come from me leveraging my network, right? So that's how powerful it can be when you're just intentional about building community in your own space. And it's just something that I'll always be grateful for. Like one of my past guests on the show was the one who said, "Hey, Raina, I listened to your podcast. I saw you just had a baby. Are you looking for a job right now?" And that little, she didn't come. I didn't tell anyone, but I was telling my story on my platform. She was already engaged with me because she was on the podcast, and that natural synergy was how I landed at Paramount. So there are people in your community, in your network, if you're just natural about who you are and you're intentional about, staying in touch with them, you can definitely leverage that.
I think I want to ask an inverse of the question that you just asked. Can I see a raise of hands of how many of you all, and maybe there aren't many because, media and like the lights and all that stuff, social networking and stuff, but how many of you all would consider yourselves introverts? Aha, okay, I want to talk to y'all for a second. If networking is not natural for you, and it's not for me, right? Like out of my peers or my group of friends, they would probably categorize me as the social butterfly of the group. I'm a people person. I love being around folks and doing stuff like this, but I would consider myself an introvert too. What I would recommend for you all is, if you know the event that you are going to, I keep going back to this idea about researching what it is you're about to attend, and have specific goals for that thing you're going to. In other words, who's the person in this space that I actually want to speak to? If you can identify that ahead of time and come up with your strategy of engagement, then you can manage your battery, if you know what I mean, right? When you go to that space, you can have that target, you can figure out how you'll engage with that person, and if it's one or two people, when you make that engagement, you get that contact information, you've hit your goal. And you might be able to do that within the first 10, 15 minutes of you being there, and it's like an hour-long event. And if you don't network with anybody else and it's a challenge for you, you've still at least hit your goal. And so for the folks who struggle with networking and have a bit of a lower threshold or for that kind of work, I would just say, make sure you have just some goals. Figure out who it is that you want to speak to when you get there. For those of you who are the social butterflies, you'll be fine. You're going to do great. You're in the right environment for it. I do think having some goals would still be helpful for you too, and that skill set will take you far. So I would say just like keep doing what you're doing and be also strategic about it. That's what I would offer.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that. I think for sure, do the research, know who's there. I do a lot of these types of events, and I'm always impressed, and I always remember the people that come to my table and say, I've been waiting to talk to Mattel. Like, I've been waiting to talk to you. I'm here to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, this is someone who wants to be here, and I would want to put in front of a hiring manager because I know they've done the research. I know that they know our product. I know that their values resonate with ours, and so you're already a leg ahead.
And follow up. I think it's something that I realized, like in just the past 2 hiring cycles, if you meet someone, send them a note. I don't think I think the art of emailing might be going down the drain. I don't know, Gen Z, but it's just one of those things, like, maybe it's your social media. If you see them on Instagram, send them a note. Hey, it was nice to meet you. Send them an email. That can go a long way in making people remember you. And that's the big thing. Be memorable. And whatever it is, right? You don't have to be like outwardly like this big showman person, but you can just be you, but make sure that you're letting that person know that you remember them, and then hopefully they'll remember you as well.
Yes, and I will piggyback on that also. I see you're all taking notes, a lot of you, and that's great. So like when you're out there networking, after each table or person you talk to, make a note of something that the person you were speaking to said. And then when you're sending that follow-up email, refer to that. Because a lot of the times I get emails from students and they're just like, oh, hey, I met you at, I'm John and I met you here. And I'm like, I don't know, I don't know who John is. So, but if he had said like, oh, I'm the one that, went to, France this summer or whatever it might be, then I'll remember. So just kind of little tricks like that.
Can I add one more thing before? Yeah, we like this question, right? I have gotten follow-up emails from folks after being at networking events, and they'll send like a nice note, and they'll put like a picture of themselves in it, and I'm like, oh, thank you. Yes, I know. I remember you. I know who you are. And then is it Gen Z? Use your Riz. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's y'all language, right? Like, we like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot of conversation up here around identity. Like, you can find the job for you, and like one where you can be yourself. I am myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, I am who I am, and I use that. I know who I am and what I look like, how I present. And there are spaces that benefits myself. And so when you send that follow-up email, send that picture, especially if it's like a networking event, because that helps people identify with who you are and what was unique about you, and that has been very helpful for me.
Aaliyah?
I was going to say, I'm glad you explained what I've been doing all this time. I'm introverted, definitely. I got to a point with networking where I was like, oh my God, when I go to these things, I don't want to meet more than 2 people. Because I'm just like, if I walk out with 15 cards, I'm not going to follow up with 15 people in any meaningful way. But if I can talk to 2 people that I really have a great connection with, and find something that is worthy of continued conversation, then I feel like it was a win. And when I get the emails after big events like a summit like this, I'm not generally in a place where I can set up coffee meetings with 20 people. It's not going to happen. So when I get the email that says, here's specifically what I'm looking for, or here's specifically, here's what we talked about, here's how you can help me specifically, I'm much more apt to go after that email and try to find that connection for someone than I'm generally interested in what you do. Let's have a conversation about what you do, because if I have a moment, I will get to that. But most likely I won't have a moment. So I would say be very specific in your follow-up email. To someone like me, I love very specific information about what points of connection I can make for you.
Mm-hmm. All great tips and pointers. And we're all busy, like especially if you're talking to senior executives, recruiters, and stuff like that. They're all busy. So the extra step that you take to remind them of like who you are is key, right? Like, we all have many things on our plate. So do you all. This is just something that you can do to really stand out. We only have a couple of minutes left before we head over into Q&A. So I do want to end off with maybe 2 inspiring questions. What advice would you give your 20-year-old self, and what excites you about the future?
You said 20-year-old?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of the pivot. It's going to happen. You have no idea where you're going to be in 10 years. No idea. You might think you do, but you have no idea. And so I would tell my 20-year-old self that the big plan that I had is going to change. And so I shouldn't be as invested in, I have to have this job right now. So I definitely put that out there, and keep in mind that life is going to throw you a lot of curveballs. That's the idea. That's what you're in for. So all of your plans are important to make, but be ready to change. And the toolbox that you are filling with all of the skills that you have, when you're making those pivots, there are people that you're going to carry along with you. There are contacts that you are going to keep, and there are things that you learned in the last job that are going to be just as important in the next one. So keep that in mind along the way.
What excites you about the future?
What excites me about the future? AI? I don't know.
Nice. Great.
I have one. The thing that I'm thinking about is 20-year-old at Princeton. I was obsessed with dance, right? Like, beyond academics, dance was my life. I was a dancer. You couldn't tell me nothing. We were a gang. Like, my dance company, we were a gang. And we thought, like, that was our whole world. And I just wish I could go back in time and say, get out of your comfort zone, right? Like, that world was something that I knew. It was my safe space. But looking back at it, there was so much at college that I didn't explore because I thought, oh, I don't have time. I'm a dancer. I can't be anything else other than that. So I would have definitely explored so much if I was just a little bit more courageous to get out of my comfort zone of like people, of experiences, of things, and just tried something new.
Yeah, I'll go with that one. I would say I went to USC for my undergrad. Any Trojans in here? No? Okay. Usually it's full of it. Yeah, thank you. I wish I had gotten a little bit more involved on campus. Knowing what I know now about the resources available on college campuses, since I work with the offices so often, is I wish I'd used my like career services more, my student services more. Like, I wish I'd explored the services offered by my university instead. I was just kind of making it on my own and trying to forge ahead. So, definitely if you haven't done that, like, and you still have time and you're still a student, like, please do that. I think you'll find you don't have to go through this alone. There's things there to help you in place. What am I excited about for the future? There's a Masters of the Universe movie coming out in 2026. Go see it.
I don't know if I know the answer to this question. When I was 20, this is undergrad, I wish that, the career services at the school that I was in, I don't think guided me in the direction that I needed. And so it would have been helpful to have more of a team around me to figure those things out. I would also say at 20 and even through the beginnings of my career, I wish I had a little bit more guidance around financial literacy, just to be honest. So like, when you land that first job after undergrad or grad school, don't hesitate to ask the institution questions around like, I'm sorry to be, this might be the most boring part of this, but like what the retirement plan is, like what is compound interest, like what is the 401k, 403b, like please ask questions around that stuff. A lot of times in entertainment and media, because things pivot so much, being able to navigate and find stability in those kinds of long-term financial management things will help you feel a sense of safety if the bi-weekly or bi-monthly paycheck is changing. At least you have like this other financial asset component of your life moving in some degree. And in the earliest jobs that I had, I wasn't as savvy about that. And I wish that I was. That's a little post 20 years old, but for all of you, as you go into your careers, don't underestimate the power of like investing, retirement plans, because your career might pivot. And once you get to an older age, that might be something that you can fall back on that will help you very, very much.
I have an advice as well. Things will all work out. Even for me right now, I have to tell myself that things will all work out. If you have, a right head, like if you are driven, career oriented, you want to accomplish stuff, like things will figure out on its own, sort of. Like that's what I've came to realize. And also what I'm excited for, all of you. Yeah. So we're gonna head into the Q&A session, and if you have any questions, feel free to come down to the stage, and this is the mic that you will be using in terms of asking what other questions you may have. I believe we've allocated maybe like 15 minutes or so, or less, I don't know. But yeah. And make sure to introduce yourself. Please tell us your name and then your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Thomas Benjamin. I'm a music marketer and publicist. Question from the panel and question for the audience as well. What issues bother you and how do you use your professional role to address them?
When you say issues, do you mean like in the industry or just in general?
Societal issues or issues in the industry?
Ooh, that's broad.
I can start. Well, I think for me, I came into my role with a specific interest in diversifying the media and entertainment industry. And so I used my role to create workforce programs that give an access point to people who may not have completed college, to give access point to people who do not have family members who are already in the industry, which is how a lot of people get jobs in media and entertainment. So that's one way, I would say. And then the split side, the other side of my person, the storyteller side of my person, I am focused on stories that I think are expanding the conversation about how we as humans, treat each other, how we as humans engage with each other. So I think that's been my approach. And when you talk about values and why I do the work that I do, I've been with the mayor's office for 10 years, even though I thought it was going to be like a short stint in this job. I thought, I'll do this for a few years and then, I'll go back to producing full time. But I love and get a lot of energy out of being able to help people find an opportunity in this industry. I feel like the creative industries are so powerful, and there's so much agency in what we do, whether it's storytelling through advertising or publishing or the publicist or, the marketer or, and so from that perspective, I love being able to help people get their opportunity in the industry. And so it's been so rewarding. It's been difficult to pull away from doing it. So.
I think maybe we'll have one question per person and one response to move things forward. Okay, well, thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Lex. I'm a writer-director. I was curious, what's either like the worst cover letter you've ever received or like a really memorable like interview faux pas that we shouldn't repeat?
I can take this. I've seen multiple cover letters where it's like, hey, Nickelodeon, I'm just like, no.
Tell.
Yeah, so just make sure to proof that. I can 100% tell if you're copying and pasting it from another cover letter, and then showing up like 20 minutes late for the interview without any sort of notice when the interview was 30 minutes and it was like a senior director. So these are just very common etiquette things that I have seen recently too. So just be mindful of people's time. And if you're going to put forth like a cover letter, like it's your effort, like make it worth it for yourself.
We say this a lot in film and entertainment, but I think it applies to all industries. When you're when you're early, you're on time. When you're on time, you're late. Remember that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I have a really quick one to add to that. Is just if someone wants to interview, try to make it happen. I had a candidate that I thought was phenomenal, but she told me she was on vacation and she couldn't do an interview with me until she came back. And I was just like, girl, if you want this job, you'll find a way to make it happen.
Find internet.
So it was yes, Aaliyah. So just know that somebody, if you really want the job, you'll try to find a way to make that happen. Don't make excuses.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joshua Jacob. I'm from Rutgers University. I kind of switched majors around a bit. I was like doing psychology, then I did education, then I switched while I was in grad school for communication media. As someone who's about to like graduate really soon, how would you get like more experience if like you can't get an internship?
Make your own experiences. And I say that because when I first came out of college, I thought I was going to have this big media job, and I didn't get that, right? So I was working at the Nonprofit Institute, and then I said, hey, I want to be a writer. I'll start my own blog. This is when blogs were, still popping back then, right? And just the very act of me at least building my own portfolio, right, which is probably what you want, figure out ways. Are there ways that you can volunteer your time? Could you find an organization that you can do things for free even, right? Just to build your portfolio and to build momentum, because that's the biggest thing right now in your career. You guys are riding off of a lot of momentum, right? You're about to graduate for some of you. Like there's all this ambition, all this hustle that you have. Don't let that go to waste. Even if you don't get that job offer, find ways to keep that momentum building, get small wins for yourself in some way, like really make sure that you're taking care of your mental health, all that stuff, because it's gonna be so important even if that internship or that job doesn't happen right now. But things will work out, as Irene said, right?
All right, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you so much for all your insightful sharing. And my name is Jing Yi, and I'm a recent graduate from Columbia. I'm actually looking for my first full-time job in my life right now. And I want to ask some advice for how to better position myself in my career in media industry based on my own cultural background, because I'm actually an international student from China, and English is not my first language. But when I was looking for jobs in media industry, I sometimes feel it's kind of a barrier for me. But I'm also feeling like it should be also an advantage for me because I have more cultural capital in this way. So I want to ask for some advice on how to leverage my own cultural background in this way. Yeah.
Can I just say that you speak really well?
Thank you so
don't
much.
think I've caught on that you used any fillers while you were speaking. So
Thank you.
I just used a filler.
Thanks.
Are you leading with your background?
I'm leading.
When I ask that, I'm saying when you present yourself, are you presenting yourself as an international student who has Chinese or heritage and maybe language skills, that could be valuable? When you say media, are you looking at a particular sector? Are you looking at news or I'm curious just because I agree with you. I feel like leading with your unique heritage should be valuable to some organizations. So figuring out which organizations that may be valuable to, I think is a part of the work ahead.
Yeah.
So are you leading with I'm an international student from China, and I've been here 4 years, and now I'm graduating, and I'm looking to do this?
Yeah, actually, I have been here only for 1 year.
Okay.
Yeah, so most of my life I was living in China, and but I want to working in such an international environment. And for me myself, I'm actually running my own social media channel for a while. So I'm wondering maybe I could work for some organizations or companies who want to break into China's market and want to run in their social media there. Maybe that can be my advantage in this way, because I know there may be other international students here as well. So I also want to ask this question for all of them, like how can we leverage our international background?
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
I would say do what you just did. What makes you unique is your value added to the institution you're speaking to. And so oftentimes, institutions like ours, for example, it is a priority. It's a part of our mission in order to connect. It's a part of our mission to connect to all kinds of demographics. We're a very diverse organization. And so looking for organizations that value what your unique qualifier is might be a good way for you to position yourself. And there are a lot of institutions, particularly in arts and media, who are looking for you in particular. And so this advice is good advice, leading with what you just did. Here's who I am, and here's what I can bring because of who I am. I myself have also, throughout my life, whether it's in universities or jobs, have been the only person in that room that looks like me or comes from where I come from. And that is what those institutions actually valued. And so finding the institution for you that values what you bring might be helpful.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks.
How are you guys doing? My name is Olivier Toussaint. I'm a recent graduate of Howard University. And my question to you all as a panel is, in a world where getting no response from a company when you're applying for a job is becoming more prevalent than a no, what advice would you give to someone who's trying to get some feedback on how to pivot to the next job application? How would you want an applicant to respond to getting no response, and what tangible actionable steps would you take to maybe improve the next job application or the next reach out to someone if there are no responses to sort of take advice on and sort of change and adapt to it?
Can I answer this one? Can I? HU? One, I would say not to expect one. If you're expecting a response and you don't get one, that could tarnish your motivation a little bit, and that gets difficult if you are applying over and over. You're like, what the fuck? No one's responding to me. I would also emphasize what was mentioned earlier. If you really want to work at that organization that you're applying to and you didn't get a response from, research it, investigate it, and show up. Go to their events, make yourself known, present, find other folks that might help you network into that organization if you're not getting a response. I've found that to be particularly helpful, but you never really know why an institution or organization isn't responding. And so assuming or expecting that you'll get a response, you might not. That's part of the name of the game, and I wouldn't want you or anyone else to be demotivated by that. But doing the research on that organization, the who's who, and finding a way to connect to specific people in the organization or going to events might be more fruitful when you're not getting a response from that particular place you want to work at.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just keep in mind, it may not be you. Sometimes internal things happen. A hiring manager went on a leave for 4 weeks, and you're seeing that job posted, and you're like, it's still up. Things happen that don't necessarily reflect you as a candidate. As a recruiter, we have many, many recs that we're working on. So just kind of note that from a business perspective, things move much slower internally than the candidate wants it to, but that's just the nature.
Sometimes the job posting is no longer needed either because they no longer want to, they don't need to fill that position anymore, so.
Thank you.
Hello all, my name is Akos Forty, and I am a graduate from Howard University and Columbia University with degrees respectively in computer science and enterprise risk management. So I have a background in want to finding inefficiencies and effective resource allocation, and I was curious about the disconnect you had mentioned earlier, Associate Commissioner, from the workforce in hiring talent, and particularly early career talent. I'm not certain exactly the data on the demographics of how much it makes up in particular workforces and respective companies up here up front, but I was just curious in possibly what I assume to be as a minority entirely what the disconnect from the workforce's perspective as opposed to having many representatives here from who are applying and from the candidate's perspective. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
I recently met with the executive director of the Center for Urban Future, who's a research institution that puts out reports on all kinds of stuff in Brooklyn and New York City, oftentimes workforce development reports. One of the things that they identified was that Brooklyn in particular has many workforce development organizations, and many institutions and sectors also exist in Brooklyn and New York City, but there aren't many bridge institutions that connect the graduate of a workforce development program to the actual sector, the institution. It's a gap that you're identifying. It's a bit of a deficit here. I know in Brooklyn in particular, maybe even in New York City. So, I mean, I do know that there are some, BRIC is one of the organizations that considers itself one of those bridge institutions. And so I don't know if it's helpful for you to find out who all of those, who are those organizations where it's their focus to bridge the gap between the workforce development institution and that particular sector. Like, who is connecting someone that's graduating from a program, putting them on a trajectory to do production, for example, and that actual production house. Is there a company that focuses on that? Like finding that, or even connecting with a research institution that has that data, because they'll know who those institutions are.
And I know at a company like Paramount, there's a lot of pipeline programs. So like, you know, if you want to work in production, well, no, that's NBC, like the PAGE program, right? At Paramount, there's like the internship program where a lot of these big companies, sometimes it's about how you get in initially. In Paramount Advertising, there's a sales associate program, right? So a lot of these big companies might have different talent pipeline programs, especially for early graduates. So doing some research about what that might be. Like, I know a lot of people in the sales associate, they just do it for 6 months to get in the door and then try to pivot. So that might be a way to also look at it too. If you see a company, maybe there's some kind of talent pipeline program that they already have internally that's helping them feed those candidates for those early, you know, first job post graduation, because that's the big thing. You know, it's the thing about jobs want experience. What if you had no experience yet, right? So it's also about how are you leveraging your resume. All the stuff you did in college, like if you had an internship or a job on campus, that's not college, that's a job, right? So now that you're graduated, you list that as a job and not just something just for college, and just kind of be creative with how you're positioning the experience that you do have.
And I would say the big disconnect that we see in my office is employer engagement. That's where the pipeline program is not connected to the training program, and that's what I'm often paying for when I'm paying an organization like RealWorks or Brooklyn Workforce Innovations. I'm paying for a person to be responsible for employer engagement, because the employers have to know about the training program and they have to be invested in the outcomes of the training program. So if this program is not satisfying what the employers are looking for, then why does the program exist, or how can the program be, you know, modified to meet? And so we've structured our programs through, and a lot of them are made in New York, if you're familiar with that. We've structured our programs so that after you complete the training, there's 2 years of placement support. And that 2 years is supposed to be your on-ramp to being able to find jobs yourself. So for 2 years, you have a number you can call and say, I can't find a job myself, I need help. And then there's a person on the other side who's engaging with all of the employers and knows where the opportunities are. So, you know, we've structured our programs to give you that 2-year on-ramp, but a lot of programs are not structured that way. There is no employer engagement side of it. It's just training and then go find work. And so that's much harder. Because if employers weren't engaged on the front end to say this is the kind of training that we buy into, that we support, that we feel, you know, is preparing candidates for the jobs that we have, then you know, you're kind of dropping off of a cliff at the end of the training. So I think that that's a key element, that, you know, the employers have to buy into the training, and then they have to at least have some point of contact in order to have candidates be introduced to the employers.
Noted, and thank you for your insights.
And I think we only have time for one more question. I'm really sorry for the others, but go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tatiana Falzone. I am currently in the middle of my master's program at Baruch College. First off, it's so lovely getting to meet all of you, and thank you all so much for your time giving us advice and answering all of our questions today. I'm pretty sure all of us agrees that we all appreciate it. Now, my question is in regards to networking. So with technology always being on a rise and also social media, a lot of networking nowadays is done online through LinkedIn or even through Instagram. So how do we make ourselves more memorable through those interactions online, through these messages that we are consistently sending to these different people online? And also, how do we even keep those connections afterwards through just a message?
Do any of you have people that you've never met but you feel like you know them just through your social media interactions? That's a form of networking, right? Like, there are so many people that might just respond to like stories that I post or just are casual in their correspondence or in social media where they kind of become a friend in your head. And so I think sometimes, like, try not to put so much pressure or making everything so transactional, right? Like, build the community that you're having. And that's the first thing that came to mind was like, don't just be genuine. Like, if you see somebody posting something you like you might like gardening, right? Hey, I love that garden, here's some tips. Or you're sending stuff to them naturally. It kind of just becomes this natural back and forth so that if you have an ask, right, they'll be more likely to respond because you already primed them with your interaction and it seems genuine. You're not just saying like, hey, I'm looking for a job, hire me. Like, no, nobody wants to see that on social media nowadays. So just be natural, prime the interactions, and then find the right time to have an ask if there is one, or to have a deeper point of connection that, you know, you can then use that as a jumping board for something.
I would also add knowing the culture of the institution that you're wanting to apply to, and if they are active on social media or not. Yes, technology is always evolving and social media is often assumed to be a good tool for networking, and oftentimes it is. But sometimes there are institutions and organizations who aren't as active or present or that good at using social media to network, and that might happen to be the place that you want to work at. And so an institution like that may engage with your outreach via social media and be like, well, we actually have a website on our page that you applied through traditionally. Why didn't you just do that? Why are you reaching out to me on Instagram when there's a whole page that we have here for that? So I would say, like, know the culture, like, look at what they're doing, and if they're an institution that looks like they would receive engagement through social media because that's the culture of that institution, have at it. But if not, then sometimes the traditional route might serve you better than, you know, assuming that because technology and everyone's on social media that that's the way that they're doing things, you know?
So thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, that wraps it up for your roadmap to early career success. Thank you to all our speakers for joining us this afternoon. I know you all have busy schedules. You came from California, like, you know, we have many things on our plate, but thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you for
Let's
having
give
us.
them another